David here, so now we're entering into the covenant of David. And David is a Gibor David. Gibor, where have you heard that word, right? Very famous for Isaiah 9:6, where you have El Gibor. But here David himself is a mighty one. Others are mighty. So you have the mighty men of David in 2 Samuel 23. Giants, by the way, are called Gibor, are called mighty in Genesis 6:4. And guess what? You have human beings called not just Gibor, but Ele Giborim, the mighty ones. Now, jot this down if you can, because this is a very important verse that you will use time and again with the Jesus is God movement people who love to go to Isaiah. Well, Isaiah 9:6, mighty God. There you go. But here's the verse, Ezekiel 32:21. Ezekiel 32, I always forget this verse myself, so where you have kings, human beings called in the plural, Ele Giborim, which is the same word in Isaiah 9:6, in the singular, El Gibor. In verse 20, going back to Psalm 89, I have found, that is, the elected one, David. And David is called here, my servant. So Israel is an elected one, a chosen one as well. So you have Hosea 9:10. Israel, of course, the suffering servant of Yahweh, of God. And that's throughout Isaiah 40, if you start chapter 49 and forward. And of course, the famous one in Isaiah 53. That's actually Israel, the nation. But then it's applied, obviously, to Jesus, because he is the servant of God. So you have Acts 3 and Acts 4, where Jesus is actually called the servant of God twice there. And then verse 25. So if God has a right hand, now we got the right hand of David. So that's obviously synonymous with the right hand of God, which simply means that David has now become God-like. He's the God King. We have an interesting sequence here, and I'll just run through this. God gives to David the throne, the kingdom. And what does that make David? God-like. He is invested with power. He is now mighty David, not just David. So look at this sequence of events. In Psalm 72, verse 2, of David, it says, he will judge your people with righteousness and your afflicted ones with justice. In Psalm 98, he will judge the world with righteousness and the peoples with equity or fairness. And that's said about God. So this is an exact parallel. In Psalm 72:6 of David, let David be like rain on the grass, like showers that water the earth. And then in Hosea 6, so let us press on to know the Lord, not the Lord David, the Lord God, Yahweh. As surely as the sun rises, he, God, will appear. God will come like the rain, like the spring showers that water the earth. And one last one here in Psalm 72 again, about David, may his name endure forever. As the sun shines, may his fame, David's fame, increase. May all nations be blessed by David and call him blessed. And now look at this in Malachi 1, of God, my name will be great among the nations, from where the sun rises to where it sets. So you see there the clear connection. Does that mean that, well, actually, it should mean that David is a fourth person of the Godhead, shouldn't it? If you believe that God is more than one person. But obviously, right, you can make a very strong argument that David is the only true God. That's only if you're that narrow-minded with the scriptures. So obviously, David has been invested with high power. And look, and it just goes on. It piles on the godlike nature of this human being now. Look at this. The famous firstborn, most high. So let's look at this sequence. This is an incredible sequence here. Verse 26, David calls God my Father and my God. So you can tie that to Jesus. Jesus calls God, he's my Father, my God, in John 20:17, remember, to Mary? He says, don't touch me. I'm going to my Father and your Father, my God and my God. Verse 27, my firstborn. In rank, obviously, not in time. So David is the firstborn in terms of ranks, which is read about the shields, right? The kings. He will be great among all the kings, the firstborn, the most high. Verse 29 and following, it talks about the eternal nature of David's throne, just like David himself. By the way, when it says that David's name will be forever, it means that David will be immortal. He will be forever. Not now, obviously, when he's raised, like we all will be, and we will be equally forever. And that's also said of the kingdom itself, and obviously, like I just said, us, the rulers, and you can go to Psalm 78, towards the end there of that chapter, verse 68, God chose the tribe of Judah, Mount Zion, which he loved. He built his shrine like the heavens, like the earth, which he founded forever. Note there, the earth, he founded forever. God's not going to blow up his earth. He will regenerate it. God chose David, his servant, took him from the sheepfolds. Now, the nature of David's position in terms of creation itself is amazing, and it's noted by many evangelicals. I got a quote here from the pulpit commentary. It says, David is the most high above the kings of the earth. Now, who is that as well? Who is also the most high? God.
The answer is always Jesus.
The answer is not always Jesus. I'm talking about God himself is the most high God, right? I love this quote from the Word Biblical Commentary. It says, thus, the most high status of the king is the counterpart of that of Yahweh, God, in the heavenly realm. The king does on earth what God does in heaven. The cosmic ruling power of God is invested in considerable measure, at least, in the Davidic king. So that explains it, right? That explains Psalm 45, David's throne. And David himself is called God there, right? Famously. And then it's used by the writer of Hebrews for his seed, his descendants. It makes sense. Jesus is called God because his father is called God. The famous verse in Isaiah 51:16. Again, this is another key verse you should have handy. Isaiah 51:16, where the servant of God, again, I could apply that to David and obviously ultimately to Jesus, establishes the heavens and the earth itself. That's actually used by the writer of Hebrews famously in Hebrews 1:10. So the bottom line here is that the king clearly, and not just in this psalm, but in many other psalms, he is presented, he is described, he is shown as godlike. Obviously here, it's because he's given this position, not because by nature David was God, or let alone his descendant, his seed. That would destroy, by the way, the whole teaching of the descendant of David. You cannot be older than your father, David.